All right, sounds like you're all here. Welcome, everybody. I'll call this special meeting of the Anchorage Assembly to order. Today is January 28th, 2024. It is 3 p.m. exactly. We are scheduled to 3:30. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Member Raleigh?
Here.
Member Bronca?
Here.
Member Cross?
Here.
Mr. Chair, you said that Mr. Johnson was unable to make it.
And excuse this.
Mr. Martinez?
Present.
Chair Constant?
Here.
Vice Chair Zalatel?
Here.
Member Myers?
Here.
Member Perez-Verdia?
Here.
Member Rivera?
Present.
Member Stolt?
Here.
Member Volland?
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have four.
Thank you, Mr. Sol. Would you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Rivera, would you read my motion, please?
Sure, Mr. Chair. A land acknowledgement is a formal statement recognizing the indigenous people of a place. It is a public gesture of appreciation for the past and present indigenous stewardship of the lands that we now occupy. It is an actionable statement that marks our collective movement towards decolonization and equity. The Anchorage Assembly would like to acknowledge that we gather today on the traditional lands of the Dena'ina Athabascans. For thousands of years, the Dena'ina have been and continue to be the stewards of this land. It is with gratefulness and respect that we recognize the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspectives of the Upper Coquitlam Dena'ina.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rivera. Before we get started, we'll do a brief disclosure. Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you. So the original proclamation that went out seemed to restrict the response to people experiencing homelessness. However, the S version before us today seems to be broader than that. As you all know, I'm the executive director of the Anchorage Coalition to End Homelessness. So I think if we were sticking with what's in the proclamation, it would be directly tied to the work I do in my job. But the S version as brought before us really suggests any other vulnerable individual in the municipality who may be affected by extreme cold that is not necessarily experiencing homelessness. So with that, I do not believe I have a conflict of interest, but I will leave that to the chair.
Couple of questions. Did you have any part in planning this declaration?
No.
Have you been called on to coordinate a response under the declaration?
No.
Okay, so for my part, because it is obtuse to the work of the coalition, it does not demonstrate a substantial personal or financial conflict, and I think it further mitigates the question to consider that this is a declaration of civil emergency and all members should, as best as they are possible, participate in this discussion because this is one of the highest orders of our work. So this chair's ruling, there is no substantial personal or financial interest. Next we have, are there any objection to that? Hearing none. Members, we have two items before us. One is a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly. That's AR 2024-39, a resolution of the Anchorage Assembly extending cold weather sheltering civil emergency proclaimed on January 26, 2024 by the mayor, and also an emergency ordinance to provide funding for this response. So I'll read the title of the ordinance when we come to that item. But again, first item of business is 4A, resolution AR 2024-39, resolution of the Anchorage Assembly extending cold weather sheltering civil emergency bus worldwide.
Move to approve.
Second, and do we need to move the S?
Yes.
Move to approve.
Okay, second.
So moved by Mr. Wallen, seconded by Mr. Solt. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Zalatel. That's right. So then we do have a substitute version. The reason we have a substitute version is because I had two heroic helpers last night working on these documents, both Mr. Hurt and Ms. Hines, and when you work quick and late to get things by the deadline, so we could notice a meeting. Sometimes you miss things, especially if you don't have your more expert individuals who've been through this process a number of times, who were available today but not yesterday. So that's why we have the substitute version, which just slightly corrects a couple of items. So, any discussion on this item? Ms. Alves?
Thank you. So, as I mentioned during my disclosure, I really appreciate the S. I think that this sustained period of double-digit negative temperatures for the next foreseeable future is likely to impact a number of vulnerable people in our community, such as potentially seniors or those who are unable to possibly keep their heat cranked up. And I mean, just to share a quick anecdote, yesterday I was helping one of my tenants with a heating problem. And so I think this cold is very serious, and I think we need to be communicating to all residents of the municipality that if they're having any issues related to the cold and finding a warm place to be, that we are letting them know where those warm places are. So I appreciate that expansion, and I hope if this passes, that communication can be around what municipal buildings are open during the day and what hours those are open, with that invitation to come in. I think that that's often all it takes to make someone feel comfortable in those circumstances, is that open invitation, you can come in, and this is a safe space to get warm. Thank you.
Mr. Rivera?
Yeah, thanks. So a few questions. So I appreciate the S version and the intent that I heard from the assembly, but I want to hear that same intent from the administration. So I guess to members of the administration, how are you planning to communicate to housed individuals that these facilities are ones that they can use if they are in crisis?
Through the chair, Mr. Rivera, I would say right now, this is I probably should have read this earlier, but the first I've heard of this broader intent, so I think we'd have to discuss how we get that word out and what facilities we might make available. I think we did talk about the idea of perhaps fire stations being available, but that presents some challenges with potentially restricting the ability of crews to go on calls, so I think there's some details that we need to work out.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And I look forward to hearing about further about that. I'll go ahead and, is there anyone else in the queue?
I have myself in the queue.
Okay, great. Then I'll go after you.
Yeah, so one of the rationales for the expansion is there are two members right now who I'm aware of who have tenants who have properties whose heat is going out actively in the middle of this. And those people need to be considered in this conversation as well, because you never know who it is. We can't simply say it's for those without housing, because ultimately, if a person's heat is not working, they don't have housing. And so we need to be more cognizant. That was why the expansion. I would note the scrivener's error to the clerk on the second page, line 47. It should say Tuesday, February 13th, not Wednesday. Originally it was 14th, February 14th, but it should be Tuesday. So I think that's fairly scrivener's error, correct? Yeah. So, and the reason we extended to Tuesday, February 13th is because there's a regular assembly meeting on that day, and should the need to extend the emergency further, we didn't want to have to call a special meeting within 48 hours of the 9th and then have to have a regular meeting on the 14th or 13th. And so we just extended it for the efficiency of our process. So that's, I think, the only other substantial difference in the upholding of the declaration, proclamation of civil emergency. So those are my comments. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Good segue. So what criteria is the administration going to use to ask for an extension? As I understood it, the reason that this emergency was proclaimed was because of the double-digit negatives this weekend. So could you just talk a little bit about if it needs to be extended further, what criteria you're going to use?
Through the chair, I might ask Alexis Johnson to come up. I would say broadly to Mr. Rivera that if the temperatures do rise if the temperatures were not to rise and they would stay in the negatives as they have been lately, we would consider extending or requesting an extension. Alexis.
That one doesn't work.
Through the chair to Mr. Rivera, the reason we requested this was because we had 9 days of negative sub-zero temperatures. After those 9 days, it is forecasted to be above those temps, well into the positives. So if we do in fact have continued negative double digits, we will ask for an extension, but the weather forecast for now seems to show a positive outlook.
Thank you.
I would note, this was not a request of the administration, this was on our end, just because for efficiency, the 9th is not the best date, the 14th or 13th is the best date on our end, just in case. Is there any further discussion about this? So I just note that I'm grateful for the administration for coming along to figure this out and ensure if we do in fact hit that minus 25 day, we have places for people to go. So with that, no one else, queue members may proceed to vote, or a roll call vote. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Ms. Branga?
Yes.
Mr. Constant?
Yes.
Ms. Zalatel?
Yes.
Mr. Cross?
Yes.
Mr. Volland?
Yes.
Ms. Brawley?
Yes.
Mr. Stolt?
Yes.
Mr. Perez-Verdia?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes 11-0.
On a vote of 11-0, AR 2024-39S has passed the body. Next, we have emergency ordinance 2024-1S, an emergency ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly providing financial resources for labor, supplies, and other expenditures required to address municipal response to cold weather sheltering civil emergency by appropriating an amount not to exceed $200,000 from the area-wide general fund 101000 to a fund to be determined by the chief fiscal officer, approving a temporary exception to the unreserved fund balance designation policy for the municipality. Let's move on.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Zalatel, seconded by Mr. Rivera.
Approve yes.
Yeah, it is yes, that's what I read.
Okay, great.
So, if you all don't mind, I will go ahead and start. This was introduced in order to provide funding for this emergency response. It's in excess of what Ms. Johnson and I had discussed that the need is. This is a not to exceed amount, doesn't actually spend any money. And so if we spend less, we need less, great. So we aimed a little bit higher so that we could ensure there were resources available. And the resources would be to cover staffing, would be to cover meals, if provided, would be to cover security, would be to cover any manner of expenses related to stepping up and maintaining operation of the warming spaces. And so this being an emergency ordinance, it has a higher requirement of passage. It's 9 votes because it wasn't noticed to the public. And I have discussed with the chief fiscal officer the source of funds, and we kind of went back and forth a little bit on where the funds go. But because of the short-term turnaround, and this is not a normal thing for us to do, we're going to say the CFO can designate which fund they go to when the time you have the chance to figure that out. And so it could be to the health department, it could be to the manager's office, it could be to the Office of Emergency Management. It really depends on where the best purpose is by the CFO. So that's the plan as a whole. Ms. Zalatel.
Thank you. And so I think the emergency ordinance really provides the flexibility to look at that broader response and turn on those spaces or support those spaces that may be on during regular business hours that might get additional traffic. Also might give the same flexibility to look for partnerships. The senior center jumps to mind, particularly those partners we may need to being out in Eagle River, Chudiak, right? Places you may not be able to travel. If you're having a hard time keeping your home warm, you may not have the means to travel into the municipalities, similarly in Girdwood. So I hope we think broadly. I have the feeling we won't necessarily know the need because people won't necessarily always ask for help. But if we can offer it in such a way, we may see people coming for help. And I know that's a tough balance, but sometimes it's really hard to ask for help or know when that time is. And this is just a really dangerous time and temperatures are so low for such a sustained period. Thank you.
Anyone else? Just concluding note that the charter requires in order to pass such an ordinance that an emergency be found by the assembly, and the passage of the previous resolution, I believe, stands as documentation of the finding of an emergency, so it meets the threshold. Ms. Braga.
Yes, I just wondered if we'd looked at schools possibly.
Through the chair to Ms. Bronco, we did not want to interrupt any of the programming at any of the schools or the recreation centers.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had, if the chair will allow, the upstairs of the solid waste services administrative building, are we going to be using that?
Through the chair to Ms. Bronga, the warming 30 persons that we added at the solid waste services or the former solid waste services admin building is in the administrative side of the building.
Excellent, thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing and hearing none, members may proceed to vote.
Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Mr. Rivera?
Yes.
Ms. Bronga?
Yes,
Chair Constant?
Yes.
Vice Chair Zalata?
Yes.
Mr. Cross?
Yes.
Mr. Volland?
Yes.
Ms. Brawley?
Was that a yes, Ms. Brawley?
yes, I was.
Thank you.
Mr. Schultz?
Yes.
Mr. Presverdia?
Yes.
Mr. Myers?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the motion passes 11-0.
On a vote of 11-0, EO number 2024-1S has passed the body, exceeding the threshold required for emergency ordinance. So with that, I would just note that there may be another special meeting called later this week to address concerns relating to the Cooper River project, and that will be sent out as soon as the individual who's requested the meeting has finalized the information that we need. And with that, the next on our agenda is audience participation. Anyone from the audience wish to be heard? Anyone at all? Seeing here none. Next, assembly member comments. Mr. Salt.
No, just it'd be nice to have this, I guess, preloaded. We know it's going to get cold in Anchorage and just be set up for this. So no authorization, so it's going to get any delays or days. Thank you.
Mr. Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. As the administration prepares its communications, can you please make sure that you share those with the assembly so that we can put them out? Thank you.
Mr. Molland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank my colleagues for being willing to meet on a Sunday and get this done for our community. Thank you.
Ms. Zalatow.
No comment.
Mr. Presverdia.
No comment, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Myers.
No additional comment.
Ms. Brawley.
No comment, thank you.
Mr. Cross.
No comment, thank you, Chair.
Did I miss any one of the members? Ms. Braga.
No additional comment.
Mr. Martinez. It's hard for me to see.
This is Mrs. Zonda, no comment.
All right, thank you. And for my part, I appreciate the swift approach that everybody made themselves available that could. And I also want to particularly thank both the clerk, Jamie Hines, and Legislative Council Matthew Hurt for putting in the midnight oil for us on our end to get these documents prepared and ready. And thank you, everybody, for that. We are adjourned.